from the book of Psalms, the 28th chapter and the 7th verse. The 28th chapter and the 7th verse, which reads as follows, it's on your screen, from the New Revised Standard Version, said, "The Lord is my strength and my shield. In him my heart trusts. So I am helped and my heart exalts." The word exalts can be translated to mean rejoices, or my heart takes joy. And with my song, I give thanks to him. The Lord is my strength and my shield. In him, my heart trusts. So I am helped and my heart exalts. And with my song, I give thanks to him. A second reading, which is not on the screen, comes from an incredibly powerful book by a Black woman scholar named Barbara Holmes. And the title of that book is Unspeakable, Joy Unspeakable. Joy Unspeakable. If there was a title for my sermon today, it would be Joy in Jesus. But this is the poem that Sister Barbara Holmes, professor, shared with us in her book, Joy Unspeakable. Joy unspeakable, listen as I read it, is not silent. It moans, hums, and bends to the rhythms of the dancing universe. It is a fractal of transcendent hope, a hologram of God's heart, a black hole of unknowing. For our free African ancestors, joy unspeakable was a drum call that invites the spirits to dance with us and tell tall tales by the fire. For the desert mothers and fathers, joy unspeakable is respite from the maddening crowds and freedom from church unsaid. For enslaved Africans during the Middle Passage, joy unspeakable is the surprise of living one more day and the freeing embrace of death, chosen and imposed. For Africans in bondage in the Americas, joy unspeakable is the moment of mystical encounter when God tiptoes into the hush harbor, testifies about divine suffering, and whispers in our ears, "Don't forget, I taught you how to fly on a wing and a prayer. When you're ready, let's go." How I got over after swimming safely to the other side of the swollen Ohio River, when you know that you can't swim, it is the blessed assurance that Canada is far, but not all that far. For African members of the invisible institutions, the emerging Black church, joy unspeakable is practicing freedom while chains still chafe, trusting God's healing and home remedies, prayers, kerosene, and cow party tea. For the rap dancing boogie woogie rap rock blues group who also hear God, joy unspeakable is that space time joy continuing thing that dares to play and pray in the interstices of life. It is the belief that the phrase, the art of living, means exactly what it says. Joy unspeakable is both free and cloud, both fire and cloud, the unlikely merger of trance and high-tech lives, ecstatic songs, and a jazz repertoire. Joy unspeakable is a symphony of incongruities, of faces aglow and hearts on fire, and the wonder of surviving together. Joy unspeakable. It's a wonderful book, and it's a beautiful poem, and I encourage you to read it. And so today, rather than talking about Black trauma, and there's a whole lot of Black trauma going around, and we've been in it for a long, long time, I want to talk about joy. I want to talk about joy. I've had a lot of different teachers in my life, and some of them have been trained scholars. You know, Dr. James Cone, Dr. Cornel West, and others were my teachers, Dr. James Forbes. But I've had some other teachers. They hadn't gone to PhD school, but they had the PhDs in life. I want to share with you a testimony about some of my teachers. When I was a young seminarian, my pastor, Reverend Dr. Michael Haynes, gave me an assignment to go visit a nursing home full of old people. I was about 25 years old. He told me to go visit Cookie Gilchrist. Her name was Cookie Gilchrist. We called her a little bit because for those of you who knew Mother Paynes, Cookie Gilchrist was even shorter than Mother Paynes. She was just a short little thing, but she had a huge spirit. And I used to go visit Cookie every other week. And after a while, I realized that I was going to lift her spirits, but every time I left her, I felt like she had lifted my spirits. She always had a smile. She was one of the most happiest people I have ever seen. And here she was in her 70s in a nursing home. And Cookie would say, she said, Reverend, she called me young Reverend. I was young one time. Say, young Reverend, I got heart disease. She said, I got high blood pressure. She said, I got sugar. If y'all don't know what sugar is, then you haven't been talking to your ancestors. She said, I got sugar. She said, and they just told me I had a touch of cancer. She said, but I am not going to let none of that take away my joy. That's what Cookie used to say. She said, I ain't going to let none of that take away my joy. And she said, if all were easy, if all were light, where would the cross be? Where would the fight? That's what Cookie used to say. I have never forgotten that. I learned from Cookie Gilchrist about holding on to your joy, no matter what the circumstances of your life. And about 1981, when I was doing my PhD studies, I went to Sao Paulo, Brazil, and I spent several months spending time with some priests who went around the community, ministering in the community. I wasn't living in the high, wealthy areas. I was in a favela, a shanty town, on the edges of the city of Sao Paulo. And one day, Father Manuel Nahia took me to see an old man who lived in a little hut made of corrugated tin that is about half of my bedroom. The floor was literally the earth, the ground. And he had lost his legs, both of his legs, in an industrial accident. And he spent all day lying on a pallet in that little hut because his wife had to travel 2 hours in the morning to a factory to work and 2 hours in the evening to get back home. And so he was in that place all day long. And the priest took me to visit him. And I went, and I was back in the day when I was pretty fluent in Spanish and learning Portuguese, so we could communicate. And when I went into that place, he didn't have much there, but on the table next to the pallet was a beautiful orange. And as I was about to leave, that man took that orange and he offered it to me. And I thought about the fact that I lived in a nation where there were lots of grocery stores full of oranges. And he offered that orange to me. And he taught me a lesson about charity and about giving. And I said, no, I can't take your orange. And he said, yes, I want you to have that orange. And the priest said to me, he said, you better take that orange. He's going to be very upset if you don't take that orange. And I took that orange. And I thanked him. That man was one of the most joyous and happy people I have ever met in my life. He gave joyfully. When we say in our litany, let us give with a joyful heart, he gave that orange. He didn't have a refrigerator. He didn't have a pantry. As far as I could see, the only thing he had was an orange. And he gave it to me. And he taught me an important lesson. And you know all about me and Mama Nelda, another one of my PhDs in living life. Mama Nelda would always say, she says, my blessings far outweigh.
Rev is muted.
All of my problems. My blessings far outweigh any challenges I have had in my life. And she had a whole lot of challenges. And she would sit there when I'd visit and tell me about all of them, recount them all. From the time she was 14 years old and got on a train from New Orleans to Oakland, California, to by the time I had met her and was visiting her at her home as a senior citizen. She said, all my blessings outweigh my problems. My teachers, those particular teachers taught me the importance of that poem that Barbara Holmes referred to, and the importance of what that psalm is referring to. When that psalm says, the Lord is my strength and my shield. In him, my heart trusts. So I am helped and my heart exalts. My heart rejoices. Taught me all about joy. Joy, and it brought back to mind a song that my grandmother used to teach us. My grandmother used to teach Sunday school, and she would teach us this song that said, I got joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. I got joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart to stay. Then you say, I got peace. And then the last verse, I got Jesus, 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 Jesus down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. And then that last sentence, down in my heart to stay. Listen, we got a lot of trauma, but I want to tell you, don't let nobody steal your joy. Don't let nobody steal your joy. Celebrate joy. Rejoice every day. Rejoice in the Lord. And again, I say rejoice. Listen, on Friday, I sent in my taxes and discovered at the end of the filing that I was going to be getting a refund for the first time in about 20 years. I was going to get some money back. And I tell you, I have to tell you, I was exulting and enjoying and rejoicing around here. In fact, if my daughter, Chantel, had been here and she makes some really great margaritas, I might have had her make me a couple of margaritas right then and there. I went looking for some of my Moscato. I know some of y'all are not accustomed to Baptist preachers drinking, but Pastor Cummings does drink alcohol. I don't drink to get drunk, but I do drink. If I had a bottle of that Moscato that I usually have here, I might have poured some of that Moscato right on the spot and drank some joy juice and had a little joyful going on over at my house. Because I think that when we have moments of joyfulness in our lives, we ought to celebrate joy. And there's always joy. Listen, Frankie Beverly and me says joy and pain, not just pain, but joy and pain, sunshine and rain. So we ought to celebrate that. We don't ought to just wallow in the misery. Listen now, don't just wallow in the trauma. Don't just wallow in the despair. But remember that it's joy and pain, sunshine and rain. Listen, our ancestors knew that. We know that. What happens when the Ohio players, fire comes on? I mean, everybody in that room jumps up and starts running to the floor to dance, right? What happens when doing the butt comes on? I mean, that's called rejoicing. That's called being joyful. And all of that is depicted in the literature that we read. The color purple. Remember that scene where Suge leads all the people from the juke joint over to the church house. It's all connected. It's all about celebrating joy in our lives and not allowing ourselves to just languish in misery. Now I could go on and on and on and on. But I want you to know the part of the motivation of our lives for coming together to worship is because when we come together to worship on Sunday, Darrell Coley says, come Sunday. If something happens when Sunday comes. When Sunday comes, my trouble goes away. When Sunday comes, I won't have to cry no more. There's something that happens on Sunday when we come into the presence of the Lord. When we say the presence of the Lord is here, I can feel it in the atmosphere. When Sunday comes, we ought to celebrate the joy that comes with our knowing the Lord and with our knowing Jesus. And one of the greatest gospel songs of all times, I'm not going to sing it, I'm not going to play it, I'm just going to say, the Edmund Hawkins Sinners, oh happy day, oh happy day, when Jesus washed my sins away, when Jesus washed my sins away. He taught me how to watch, fight, and pray and rejoice every day. Oh, happy day. There's something about that happy day. And I just want to let y'all know that rather than wallowing in the misery and wallowing in the trauma, and the trauma is real, and sometimes we got to stop and take note of it, but there's also the joyful part, the joyous part. We ought to enjoy the joy that comes from knowing Jesus. We ought to enjoy and celebrate the Jesus who is the light of our lives. We ought to celebrate the joy who is the leader and guide. We ought to celebrate the joy of Jesus, Jesus who is a mighty, mighty good leader. He's a mighty good guide for our lives. We ought to celebrate that Jesus. We ought to celebrate Jesus' joy. We ought to celebrate that unspeakable joy. That joy, that song that my grandmother used to teach me when she said, I got joy, 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 down in my heart to stay. We all got it. You got it. With Jesus in your life. If you don't have it, you can get it. Just get to know him. And you can have that joy and that peace down in your heart to stay. Amen.